Hi, it's Cindy Royal, and I'm here again with another in my series talking to SJMC alumni about how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting them in their workplaces. And I'm really pleased to be speaking today with Sean Smith. Hi, Sean.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me today. And Sean graduated from our program just last year. Around this time last year, 2019, Sean was graduating with a master's degree with a concentration in digital media from our program. And shortly thereafter, he got a job with Gatehouse, which has become Gannett, as a front-end developer. So start off, first of all, talking about what a front-end developer does for a media company like Gannett.
Yeah, so I started out with, like you said, the Gatehouse company, which in November officially merged with or acquired Gannett. So now we are the largest newspaper chain in the country with 261 dailies. And I work on the corporate side of the innovation team. So we provide support to newsrooms and internal corporate stakeholders for all sorts of projects that could need any sort of innovation through tech applications. And so as a front-end developer, all of my stuff is web-based. So building websites, designing WordPress themes and plugins to help support journalists or audience researchers and things like that to help better understand what's happening in our markets and things like that. So I kind of have like a hybrid role between an actual journalism things, working with news every day, and then internal data and looking at audiences and how we can visualize that kind of information to make better decisions in our newsrooms. And I've also started moving into more design-oriented roles. So late last year, we got funding from Google to build an audio gathering app to help reporters get into audio storytelling more, moving further from whole produced podcasts and more quick on the scene audio that you can attach into a story. So if you're at a press conference and there's a good soundbite, you get to embed that straight into your story. So there's multiple ways that you can experience it. And I've been working on the UX and the UI for that. That was most of what I did at the beginning of this year before the outbreak started.
So I was particularly excited about you getting this job because at that time last year, it seemed like the perfect combination of the skills that you brought into our program, the skills and interests that you had in journalism, and then the things that we emphasize in our program in terms of coding and data and design, all the things that you're talking about. So, really glad to hear, always glad to hear about all the exciting things you're working on. But as you just alluded to, some things have changed recently. Gannett was in the news about some cuts that they had to make to deal with this pandemic. Can you elaborate on that a bit, on how that's affecting the company and yourself?
Yeah, so as with many other companies and businesses around the world right now, revenue is just down. This pandemic is affecting so many different areas of life, honestly, probably every area of everyday life. And in forecasting that there's a downturn in business, we have to start doing cost-cutting measures. And so it was this Monday that we got a memo from our CEO announcing that there was going to be reductions, and then a memo from the president of news, who is the next person under the chain in my line, announcing that there's going to be a series of furloughs over the next 3 months. And so that essentially means that for 1 week, for the next 3 months, I don't work, but I also don't get paid. So it's unfortunate, and I'm not making as much money as I was expecting to make. But in the grand scheme of things and everything going on, it's nice to still have my job. So, and then silver lining is it could have been a full layoff. There's speculation that pre-merger with Gannett, it could have most likely have been a full layoff. Gannett, classic Gannett, has been through several situations where they've had to furlough employees. Gatehouse, to my knowledge, never furloughed anyone. So this is kind of new waters for me. I mean, this is my first real job out of school. So I've kind of been on a roller coaster of a merger and a furlough in my first year. But it's just weird times for everyone. And in that furlough, I mean, legally, it's very serious. You cannot work. You cannot reply to a single email, check a single Slack notification, pop in and adjust a single line of code, like nothing. You have to turn off and be gone for for that period of time.
How is that going to affect your work processes then? Because and do you have to take the entire week off in a row?
So I don't have to take the entire week off in a row. I can split mine up. And so tentatively right now we're going by weeks because it's just kind of easier to schedule and time things out. But if something were to pop up and there was a couple of days that I needed to really be involved, I could shift my schedule around. The director level and higher has to be whole weeks at a time. So my boss, my direct boss, has to take a whole week at a time. Ability there. But throughout the week, we've been spinning up documentation and procedures for other people on the team to take over some of the roles that each of us do. So if something happens while one of us is out, we'll be able to handle it without them. But also there's general, outside of the furloughs, just the workforce has to shift in journalism to support the areas that need it most. So I know our creative operations editor, Mara, who typically works on long form storytelling, is getting shifted over to the life section of USA Today, or excuse me, the money section of USA Today, because they're really struggling to keep up with the demand of the coverage. And so she's going in there to help with workflows and editing stories and, managing content there. So a colleague of mine and myself are moving into more of the long form story roles to keep up on some of the stories that have been scheduled before the outbreak was happening, that were coming out in the next couple of months to help support those areas. So
Can you give a sense of how much of the company is affected by this furlough?
The only one I can really speak directly to is the news division, because that's the only hard information that I've seen, because that's where our team is under. I'm absolutely sure it's affecting every division, especially sales and HR and hiring. I mean, there's no way we're hiring right now, right? So I do know with us specifically, I believe it's $38,000 a year and under are not directly affected by the furlough. And that's been written about by several other media organizations that have gotten hands on the memo and things like that.
So that was across the board. Anybody making more than 38,000 is affected by the furlough across the entire chain.
Yes, within the news division. So reporters, editors, producers, front-end developers, designers, all of those people.
You have worked from home before, I imagine, in days here and there, maybe even days of the week that your organization probably allowed it. What have you had to do differently now to get prepared for an at-home workspace?
Yeah, so we, about a month into working here, we started doing Fridays from home. And then one of our colleagues actually lives in Columbus, Ohio. So she's full remote, and she usually goes into the office in Columbus, the Columbus Dispatch, but she also works from home a lot. But with regard to our team in Austin, she's fully remote from it. So she was kind of already set up for this. And it kind of just feels like a whole lot of Fridays in a row, just without the weekend coming at the end, right? So I was already pretty used to working from home, but the day we decided to go full remote, which was the second Thursday of March, I believe. So about a week after they canceled South by, and that was the week that 3 of the people in the Statesman newsroom came back from NICAR, which is where somebody tested positive a couple days after that. And that's when the scare kind of started going through the journalism organizations, because so many people from so many newsrooms went there. And that's when we really started going, okay, this is going to completely directly affect us. Um, but in my apartment in Austin, it was kind of hard to find a nice spot to sit. It's not a very large apartment. So I actually brought my monitor home from the office and set it up on my kitchen island bar area, and sat on a bar stool for a week, which was not very comfortable, but kind of got me off the couch or out of my bed and made me focus on work. But then about a week into working from home from my apartment, it had been 9 days since I had had a face-to-face conversation with a human being other than a cashier at HEB for like the 2 times I went to HEB. And so I decided to essentially move home with my parents, so I could talk to somebody. And so now I'm in Houston at my parents' house, and I'm probably going to stay here until I can not self-isolate anymore.
So that was a pretty big change for you. You had to change your location just to kind of feel like, for your own mental wellness, to be able to
Yeah.
be around people. I can relate. I live alone, and there
Yeah.
were several days that I was only texting people. And so now have started having the Zooms with students, and these interviews have been very, very helpful
Hmm.
for me, having FaceTimes with family.
Yeah.
We definitely miss that connection that we took so for granted with people. So I'm
Mhm.
glad that you're safely in Houston with your family.
Yeah.
What other skills are important to just anybody working in an at-home environment that you think you've had to develop?
Yeah. You really have to not be afraid to just send the Slack message. you, oh, I don't want to bother them with this question, but it's not like you can just turn your chair and ask them the question now, right? So it may lead to a whole lot of Slack notifications coming in and out, but trying to keep up a conversation, especially as we're designing things and you need quick, immediate feedback. Oh, I moved this here. What do you think? Oh, yeah, that looks good. Stuff like that. We get on a lot more calls, at least 2 or 3 a day, probably. Even if they're quick 15 minutes, let me show you something sort of things. Outside of work, I've done the virtual happy hours with friends. So anything like that is nice and helpful. And this comes with the job of a front-end developer, anyone working in digital, Googling everything. um, Especially if you don't have a colleague next to you to quickly ask them something, or if they're on furlough and you can't ask them something, being able to Google and find a solution to whatever question you're having.
You have to be pretty autonomous in an environment like this, even more so than
Hmm.
usual.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have a sense of any changes particularly going on at the Statesman because you had worked in that space?
Uh, Not that I know of directly. Right when everything really started getting critically serious and all of the reporters began working from home as well as much as they could, um, we're still part of, I mean, they're part of our company and we support them. And so in the case of, hey, this digital editor has been working for 3 weeks nonstop, can you hop in and help manage things on the CMS and stuff like that? Like, we're ready to do that if we get the call to do that, because that's a newsroom that we're super close tied to. My colleague in Columbus is doing the same thing with the Dispatch. She's picking up a shift here in a couple of days to kind of help their daily coverage keep up. Um, but as far as I know, they're pretty much just grinding it out there. I mean, they're doing a lot of excellent coverage with local angles and things like that. And they've, like I said, have dropped the paywall on any coronavirus content. So it's completely free to the public, which is a whole service journalism aspect that is great from a lot of the papers doing that, because it's what's necessary and is right to do, right? People need this information, and to withhold it for money, even though we are struggling for money in this scenario, is just not right to do. So it's great that they did that. And it was interesting, right when this started, I would email a few reporters about coronavirus things, and they would have an automatic reply coming back, "I promise I'll get back to your message. South by is happening right now and we're super busy." It's just like, oh no, no South by, but
Yeah, change that
that seems
message.
like a drop in the bucket at this point.
I know. I mean, it was such a huge thing when that was first announced at the beginning of the month, but obviously that was the right thing to do, because if South by Southwest had been going on as planned, it would have been in the midst of the escalation of a lot of these cases, and it could have brought
Hmm.
more of them to Central Texas. So I know it was disappointing for all involved, for all of Austin, but we're so
Hmm.
far beyond that now that there are definitely other things to be concerned about. When you were in our program just a year ago, I mean, you were a student, but you were also a teacher. You taught some web design classes. So you know about a lot of the stresses that students have when they're about to graduate and helping students find positions. Do you have any advice for students right now that are about to graduate, things that they should be doing and things that could help them in their job hunting as they go forward?
Yeah, so I feel like now more than ever is a time to emphasize your ability to work in a digital environment. Um, I mean, somebody coming from a digital media program should have all of the ability to do that and to be able to be self-sustaining in a remote workforce, in remote interviews, um, understanding Slack, or whatever program you end up on. Being able to emphasize those kind of things and your ability to get work done when you need to. I mean, journalism and mass communication programs in particular kind of teach you, hopefully, how to be nimble and agile and be able to shift your focus when you need to, because it's an industry that's changing all the time, especially now, quickly, um, and being able to find solutions to the different problems that come up within your organization. So, I mean, with me personally, we put several projects on hold and focused on coronavirus support things. So, spinning up an internal tool to hold resources and training modules about how to best cover the topic, and like Q&A forum modules to ask readers, what do you want to know about the virus in our community, so the reporters can know what topics to follow and things like that. Understanding how to shift your mindset on what you need to focus on in a time like this, I think comes specifically with a certain skill set that you should promote to employers if they're hiring right now.
And if a student finds themselves with some extra time on their hands right now, what kind of things should they be doing to bolster their portfolio?
Um, bolster the portfolio. Yeah, for sure. That's super important, especially if you're applying for a development job. They will inspect it. They will right click and inspect and view page source. Because a couple of months into working here, one of my colleagues was like, "Oh yeah, I noticed you did that same type of script in that project you did in grad school." And I was like, "Oh, you looked that close at it?" And he was like, "Yeah." So um,
That
you can't
terrifies me a little bit too.
yeah, you can't hide the code. Don't hide the code. But also, if you're building out a portfolio, don't necessarily just show what you've done. Talk about why you did it that way, especially if it's something that you've grown to know that is not necessarily the best way to do something. So I have a couple of pieces on my portfolio that use really unstructured data that's not very clean. If you want to do something new with it, you basically have to just rebuild the whole data set, and that's not efficient. Um, but being able to critique your own work and show that you can critique it means that you know what's right to do in a real environment, right? So not only showing your work, but talking about your process through it, showing early sketches and prototypes that you've done of things, and then the final project and how you got there, kind of showing a journey of the project that you worked on, I think is something that makes a good portfolio stand out.
Well, I wish you the best, you and all your coworkers, as well as your family, as you get through doing work in this environment. We really appreciate all the work that the Statesman is doing keeping us informed in Central Texas. And I, really look forward to seeing more of your projects and all the innovative things that you're doing for Gannett in the future. So take care, Sean, and hopefully we can get together sooner rather than later.
In person next time. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.